Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian and Mr. Boettcher for Breaking Down Security.
I'm here.
How was your week, Mr. Boettcher?
Not bad. A lot of work to do, but hey, it's why we make the big bucks, right?
That's right, man. It's just been a fantastic week up here in Seattle. It's been mid 60s, low mid 70s kind of temperature, sunny, not a cloud in the sky. Very not what you would think of in the stereotypical Seattle weather that you see in movies and such. So it's been really, really hard to stay inside and work.
That's good. All right.
And, I heard Austin's getting some very much needed rain, so that's always good too.
Yep, it is.
Yep.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, we are going to talk about the OWASP Top 10. And really, we're only going to talk about 5 of them because I think that there's enough good content in just the 5 to take up the time that we have today with our dear listener. And we don't want to inundate them with a lot of information. We like to do it piecemeal if we can. So we're going to start out with the bottom 5 of 10 that was given out in the 2013 report, and then next week we'll give you the top 5. And they can follow along in the book. We'll have a link to the OWASP Top 10 report that they can go through, and spoiler alert, the other 5 will be in there as well.
So they list these 10 vulnerabilities or types of vulnerabilities in web applications.
That's right.
I guess they list them in order from this is the highest impact or most prevalent, that kind of thing. So 10 being, the least that you would have to worry about overall, and 1 being the most severe or, the things that everyone should be well aware of.
Well, they have a matrix. If you're following along in the page in the report with us on page 21, they break it down by exploitability, prevalence, which is how you can find it, and how common or how in the wild that you can find it.
Yep.
Detectability, whether or not you can actually find out if you are putting out security weakness and how you can detect it. And of course, like you said, the impact, which is how I think the OWASP Top 10 is being done. The ones that we're talking about today, A6 through A10, are going to be the lesser, what are not considered very, impactful in your organization if you're doing web applications.
Oh, I see. So like for number 1, it's easily exploitable and the impact is severe, whereas number 10, average exploitability and moderate impact. So it goes down from
and
there.
then like we said, number 10, it's uncommon to do, but it's really easy to detect that this is going on.
Right.
So it makes itself spread out so that they probably assign numbers or averages to it. Hopefully we can get some clarification on that in the future. About how they do other, and these 10 in the OWASP list are not the only. These are the ones that just made the list this year. There were different ones in 2010. They've actually gone and reclassified some things, so it's a little different than what it was in 2010 or 2007. They put these out every 3 years, it looks like, and it started in 2004, I believe. So there's other ones. If again on page 21 they have. Some of these I'd never actually heard of before I started looking at this. Mass assignment. Let's see. Expression language injection. That's another one. Those were some of the odd ones that I had not heard of before that I'm definitely going to have to go back and understand. Concurrency flaws was another one. I wasn't sure exactly what those were.
So ones that didn't make the list that you probably heard of: information leakage, improper error handling. Clickjacking, things like that. Didn't make the list, but still there. Maybe 10, 11 through 20, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they didn't make the list because either they're very uncommon in the in the field or in the world, or they're extremely common and their exploitability is very difficult, or the detectability is extremely easy,
or the impact is minimal. at best.
Yeah, the impact is minimal. Yeah, exactly. So not every web application vulnerability has to be an, oh my God, total ponzerd,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to start with number 10?
Yeah, I think we should start at the very bottom, which is a very good place to start.
Okay. And we're just going to get more and more exploitable as we go along. So,
yeah.
Number 10 is unvalidated redirects and forwards. So basically what this is if I'm not mistaken, you allow redirects and forwards in the address, in the URL itself. So...
either by using JavaScript or another, a scripting language that, like Python or something, if you're running that on your website, and when a page loads, it will also redirect you elsewhere. You can also, use a, what is it? You can craft a malicious URL in a, an email with a, if you're using HTML emails, you can have it send a hidden link kind of thing.
Well, a link that looks like it comes, or it's for a legitimate site. So it might be www.amazon.com, and then it says, URL equals malicious.com or something like that, where you would accept that URL parameter and then redirect or forward that to the malicious site.
Or if your URL takes arguments, you can have it forward to some malicious JavaScript or some other malicious code or a Flash object, which will, ideally infect, or you could probably use this for like a cross-site request forgery if you could do it, or it was fast enough and the user didn't notice, where you could redirect them to a page that looks almost exactly like Amazon's site.
That's true.
I'd imagine you could do something similar to that.
So it's more along the lines of sending mass emails and having an attacker do phishing, and hopefully somebody will click the link and it looks like it's legitimate, because you see www.mybank.com, that kind of thing, but it actually takes you somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or it actually takes you to the bank site, but then the bank forwards based on the URL.
Yep. Yeah. That you definitely don't want to be using redirects on a bank's website if you can keep from it. Seems like that could be easily used, because when you're going to a bank website, you kind of expect it to be secure, but having that kind of functionality in your URLs is not a good idea.
Yeah, you should expect every legitimate website to be secure, but unfortunately that's not the case. So
that's true.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple concept: unvalidated redirects and forwards. That's number 10.
Yep. So let me see. Coming in at number 9 is my personal favorite: components with known vulnerabilities.
What do you mean by components?
Well, I would imagine you're running Apache 129, or you're running IIS5. You're running your production website off of a Internet Explorer, or IIS4 website. Basically running software with known security vulnerabilities that are not updated. And we see that a lot. I mean, you've got this niche little product, and it's been running on the server forever, and it never goes down and never gets broke.
Nobody wants to touch it, because if they did, they wouldn't be able to bring it back up.
Yeah,
if it crashed.
Bob got laid off 6 months ago, and he was the only one who knew how to make everything work on it. We don't really want to touch it, so let's not play with it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. These are all wrong things to say and wrong things to do.
Well, it could also be you're running a legitimate, like you mentioned, Apache. Well, if you're running modTCL and it has vulnerabilities, if you don't know what it is, don't even use it, right?
That's right. Well, I mean, sometimes you may need it because that was what you used a long time ago, and
You just haven't updated it yet?
You haven't updated it yet because doing so may break functionality on the site. Like, I have heard where people are using a known bug because it adds some functionality or a workaround that they didn't realize that the update would break because it was a known bug. I've heard of that. I don't have any specific examples, which makes me sad.
Well, in a company that I used to work for, I found this monitoring software, and the monitoring software did its job, whatever, but it also had this GUI that was like a web interface into the monitoring software on every stinking server that it was monitoring. So
Okay.
it opened up on some weird port, and you could go in and you could log in through that web GUI. And so I asked the guy, I was like, do you use this at all? And he's like, well, I think I used it once a couple years ago. I'm like, shut it off. Shut the thing off. You never use it. This is using something that you don't even need that has, and I found it was vulnerable to the double slash, where you could go backtrack and get into, another web page that required authentication. And so it was also, I don't think this one you actually got authenticated right off the bat, but you could, what do you call it? You could hammer away at it and brute force your way into it, I'm sure.
So it was vulnerable to directory transversal?
Yeah.
Where you could go .. / / and then like Etsy password or whatever?
Yeah, it was something like that. It was using the double slash, right? So you'd go / and then, which effectively, I guess, was a .. /
Yeah. Well, the number 9 here, I think the only thing that I would think of that gives it this widespread prevalence that it mentions in the document here would be like home routers. Home routers are, you buy a Linksys router, you set it up, you turn it on, you plug it in, everyone plugs in their computers, they get a DHCP, and then it's left and nobody uses it. And then it never gets updated. So the web interface never gets updated. You've got an application that runs your web traffic, has a web interface, and if somebody was to gain access to your network through a host or what have you, get in and find out that your web interface on your router is prone to CSRF or cross-site scripting or some kind of injection issue, because there's a patch out for it, but who patches that kind of stuff,
Right. You never heard that it was vulnerable to this because you're just a user of the product just like anybody else. And, it works. It works fine. It's not broken. Why do you need to go in and update it? Or you never think about it.
Yep. And you hear more stories about home routers being used for botnets because they're, basically set up, never looked at again once, usually they're set up, and never updated. So I guess the report here also has ways to prevent these things, and obviously one of them is to make sure you have the most updated version. Identify what components you're using. It goes more into servers, but you want to make sure that if you're running Red Hat, for example, that you're not installing everything that could possibly ever be installed on a Red Hat 6 box or Red Hat 5 box, because then Red Hat may be secure, but the instant messenger program you've got running on there or is installed on there could have vulnerabilities that could make it easy for somebody to gain access to your system.
Right. And that's why it's number 9, I guess, because it's average exploitability, but it's difficult to detect. So.
Well, I think the reason they mentioned the detectability was difficult is because many developers, and I think this report is more geared towards organizations or developers and software related, not necessarily hardware, because we come from both sides. We do a hardware and a software. We can touch both, but most developers don't even know what their software is running on. So they just upload it to an environment. They expect their environment to be secure. And if the people running the servers are running all kinds of, Bitcoin miners and instant messaging programs and BitTorrent and God knows what. They don't know that their brand new WordPress is, already been owned. So
yep.
I think that's where they're getting the difficult part. It's hard to find out what you're running on.
Well, you got to know what you need, and for, like, let's say a scanner might detect, certain vulnerabilities in products, but the scanner doesn't know if you need that product or not.
That's true. So
Right.
It's usually good to get rid of extraneous software you don't need on the system and only use a base install. I know the place that me and Mr. Boettcher work at instituted a gold image where we have a base install of software, minimal install at most, and then we build all of our systems from that, which makes sure that you only have the necessary software required.
Like Nmap.
Don't get me started.
So number 8, cross-site request forgery. So this basically takes advantage of a server's trust in the client or the browser, right?
Yeah.
So if your server trusts the browser, then it may grant the browser a lot of privileges that it shouldn't. It doesn't assume that the clients or the browsers could be malicious.
Yeah. And, actually, it's even worse than that because people, for whatever reason, trust the browser implicitly. And the browser's got a lot of things under the hood. I'm going off on a rant here, I know, I'm sorry. But, like the CA certificates on a Firefox browser, there are hundreds of CAs out there. And why are you trusting all of these CAs? Just because Firefox does? Or just because Mozilla does, or because Google does, or because Microsoft does? It doesn't make any real sense of, why the CA model works that way. You should be able to say, okay, I only want to trust, certs from, Bob. When you self-sign your own cert, that should be good enough. That should be like the PGP of, CAs, if you know for a fact that Bob has signed it. Anyway, I'm sorry I got off on a tangent there, but so we're talking about CSRF, and CSRF works by the bad guy logs in or goes to the website, he gets a session token or session ID, and from what I understand, he can send that link if the session ID exists in the URL. Basically, it has to, the best place for this kind of CSRF issue is the J session or the session ID token is inside the URL. They send it to somebody like I could send this to Mr. Boettcher.
Yep.
He can log in. He go, hey, look, your website, log into Amazon and look at this. And then he logs into Amazon. I'm not saying Amazon has this vulnerability. But then I take the original link that I sent him and I bring it up on my browser. And if it doesn't regenerate or allow or require reauthentication once the person is logged in from a different location, then I can get in with Mr. Boettcher's information, which is I think how most CSRF attacks work. There are other ways of doing it, I believe, but that's the minimal version.
Yeah, if you log into a site and your login session is good for, weeks, days or weeks, even months sometimes, then someone else can, I guess, hijack your session, right?
Yeah, exactly. I know I used to work at a defense contractor, and I've worked at several, so it doesn't really matter if anybody finds this out. Plus, it's been fixed already, so it's all cool. We
okay.
we had an issue. We had a web application very similar where they had the session IDs in there, and we were able to actually look at. We had two machines sitting right next to one another, and we had the guy actually email to his friend or send it an instant message to his friend next to it, and he was actually able to get into our application. The bad guy was actually able to get into the application, so it was interesting to see the side by side as it was happening, because you don't normally that's an attack you don't normally see. You're as the bad guy, you send the malicious link to the user, and then it's kind of a waiting game. I don't know how the malicious, the attacker would actually know if the person's logged in or not. I would assume that he just, waits 10 minutes and then tries to log in thinking that it's going to work.
Yeah, I think it's maybe the user logs in, say, to their bank. They do whatever they need to do, and then they don't log out. And then all of a sudden they get a link from somebody, they click it, and it transfers $1,500 to the attacker's account. Yeah. Using the session that's still open. They may not even be on the site. They just never logged out.
That's true. And it doesn't have to necessarily be, from Amazon. It could be a totally other innocuous website like, bob.com. But I'm able to reach down inside and go, oh, look, he's still logged into his banking website. I can do that kind of thing as well. And that's another way of doing a CSRF attack as well.
Or you could do a shotgun approach, just mass email, 1 million people if you have their addresses. And if anyone happens to be logged on to this particular site that's exploitable by cross-site request forgery, boom, you get their money because they're still logged in to their account.
Yeah, I guess if you used a mass mailing and you used one link for multiple people, there's always a chance somebody's going to use that link to try to log in. So,
well, they're already logged in. They just click the link and maybe it says something like amount equals, $50 and the destination account, and the attacker puts his own account in there.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
and
true.
It's all the application already knows the user's account because they're logged in. So obviously it comes from that account.
Yep. The one thing that I have noticed to kind of go back a little bit with all these OWASP requirements.
Yeah.
A lot of them require some of the other vulnerabilities, like with CSRF. You've got it requires some kind of injection to occur, whether you're injecting that information into a website, and you're pulling that information back from a user, or with redirects and number 10, you need to be able to have some way to run code on that system to be able to make the vulnerability happen. So a lot of these actually depend on other ways. They all require a little bit of the same jiggery pokery to make it work.
Well, it does make it easier if there are multiple. You could use them in tandem.
Mm-hmm.
It'll make an attack much easier. A lot less time to accomplish it.
So so we've talked about CSRF. How would one go about making sure that it doesn't occur?
Well, you could make sure that the user session ends in an appropriate amount of time, like 10 minutes, something like that, without activity.
So I think you would want to make sure that your session IDs are not in the URLs. That seems to be like a pretty kind of a duh kind of thing.
It doesn't necessarily have to be in the URL.
That's true.
It's just taking advantage of the user still being logged in. So when they click a link, the attacker has to know exactly what website to go to, what URL to put in, and the list of parameters that they would need in the URL.
Yeah. Well, according to OWASP, it says if you put a unique token in a hidden field on the page, and then I guess you would compare that against and sending it in the body of the HTTP request, then that keeps the chances of doing CSRF down. And it's got to be a random token, I would assume, every time, like a nonce that happens once. So if the person visits that site and it has a nonce of 5, and then I try to go back in, but when I visited the page the first time, it had a nonce of 2, and I try to go back in and do that again, you can't really tell unless you're actually on that other user's computer what the original nonce was to be able to get into the site. So that would be a way, I would imagine, to stop CSRF from occurring.
Yep.
I thought session cookies was one, but according to OWASP, that doesn't provide any defense against CSRF. So,
well, also you could, for something like a bank transfer, require the user to re-authenticate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've noticed that Amazon does that to me. When I log in and I add something to my shopping cart, when I go to check out, it asks me to put my username and password in again.
Exactly.
So I
was thinking
that's
of that.
Yeah, that's why they want you to do that, so that it protects against CSRF attacks. So,
yep, it sure does.
There you go. I figured out a real-world example, so that's pretty cool.
Okay, number 7, missing function level access control. What is this?
Well, let's just read it off the report. So it says an attacker who is an authorized system user changes the URL or parameter to a privileged function. Is access granted? Anonymous users could access private functions that aren't protected. So this sounds like running applications as root.
Okay, so
if your Apache runs as root, that's not a good thing. You kind of want to have, and later versions within the past 3 or 4 years spawn off child processes from the original Apache as they run as www or Apache or something like that, so that if somebody does gain access to the system through that manner, all they have is the user www or Apache.
This could also be, as an example, maybe a developer, if you don't have the right privs to view a certain page, he'll just make sure that it's commented out in the HTML. And so, you won't see the link. But of course, if you view source, you can see the link. Go to that site, and it doesn't try to authenticate you as, say, an admin if you're just a unprivileged user. That kind of thing. So
if logged on user equals Alice, then display X, that kind of thing. Oh yeah, that's not good. Yeah, you don't want to have that ability in your URL. Taking that kind of input so that you can escalate privileges by just changing -u in the parameter from Bob to Larry or something and gaining root privilege. That's not good.
Or it'll have a parameter that says authentication equals user or privilege equals user, and you just change that to admin, and boom, you're in. That
would be extremely unfortunate, especially if you had a multi-level system like a weblog or a WordPress that allowed for that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I mean, just have to be careful of how you allow access to certain areas of the site or of the application.
Yeah, and you might one way you might want to do that is have regular users log in from a different URL altogether. So say like users.blog.com, and then have them log into, admins would log into admin.blog.com, so that you have that separation where you may be going to an entirely different URL, but you're still logging in with a you're not using parameters in your URL to get that kind of access.
Possibly, but then if I were a user.blahblahblah.com, I would just change the URL to admin, right? In some cases, that might work.
Well, ideally, I would hope that Larry, the admin, had logged off already, so that admin.blog.com wouldn't come up to Bob. So, yeah.
So hard coding things in the app is a bad thing. Think about the process for managing entitlements and ensure you can update and audit easily. Don't hard code.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess they mention in here that enforcement mechanisms should deny all access by default, requiring explicit grants, which makes sense. That's the firewall policy method. That's standard, deny all on a firewall, and then allow only what access needs to be granted explicitly. So that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. And the last one for the day.
Yep.
Sensitive data exposure.
Well, you got this is easy. This is your easy one here, buddy.
Well, basically, hey, don't allow sensitive data in the clear.
Exactly.
Okay. Or let sensitive data out.
Yep. Yeah.
So this could be you're not using SSL, right? And somebody's accessing the site unencrypted. They authenticate, man-in-the-middle attack, like somebody's sniffing the wireless traffic that they're using at a cafe-style wireless network, and their credentials are taken.
Yeah. Yeah. I find this one A6, which is sensitive data exposure. They say that the reason the exploitability is considered difficult, and I think this is the only one that has a difficult for exploitability. Let me go down here and look again. Yeah, on the top 10, this is the only one with a difficult exploitability because they say that people don't break crypto. And for the most part, yeah, they're correct. I mean, it would take a lot of work and a lot of computers to be able to break crypto. Now, unless you're using
good crypto.
Good crypto, yeah, exactly. If you're using, dual dual EC, DRBG, the one that the RSA had in there for so long, that has backdoors, may not be so difficult. But yeah, this one just basically says use SSL if you're transmitting login credentials or sensitive information in the clear. Use a strong encryption standard. Don't use like AES with CBC for encrypting passwords or data in your databases.
Yeah, this one says, it's typically something else is wrong, such as your keys are stolen or man in the middle of the attacks or clear text data while in transit or whatever. Or you're giving the user's browser sensitive data and just trusting it. And we all know that, browsers are just tools that are used to access the site, and, browsers can be malicious.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all about storing the data on the back end as well in a secure manner as well, as we've seen in the past few weeks. This was recorded on June 7th of 2014, so if you're listening to this in the future, at the time in the past, they had eBay got its database of users hacked. The passwords were hashed, but they didn't explain why. You've got any number of social media networks at the time this was recorded had, Adobe had their passwords dumped, and the hashes were pretty easy to figure out. So storing your passwords, your sensitive data in an encrypted format, and then your passwords in a proper hashing format is always important, using bcrypt or scrypt, or good solid AES encryption is always a good thing when you're storing your data.
Yep, salt the hashes. We talked about that before.
Pepper them too. I heard about that one. Salt and pepper. Peppering is adding it's adding additional entropy. So
is it dinner time yet?
Yeah, exactly. I'm hungry. So they also mentioned autocomplete, which that does bite a lot of people in the ass. I mean, if you're not storing your cached information on your browser, you've got multiple users on one login, which never happens at any businesses I know of. I'm not saying mine, but it happens. Or you're at home and you've got Uncle Bob coming over and he logs in. Disabling that ability to auto fill your form fields is always good.
Yep, keeps the passwords away from the IT guy who could get on your computer and
true.
He probably knows your username, and then your password just pops right up. And all he has to do is press enter. Or anyone else who gains access to your computer somehow.
I guess we're going to go back down here. We've got a few minutes here left, talking about what organizations can do when, if you have a large organization that is doing applications in-house, some of the things that OWASP suggests is establishing a security program and driving its adoption, making it part of the workflow so that you will, increase your security posture. I think that's important because if you don't have one, then doing security piecemeal is never a good idea.
Yeah. What about if you outsource your development? I guess that's a topic for another podcast, right?
Well, if you outsource the development, you would think, especially if it's a second party or a third party, you would have some kind of requirement in the contract that says, okay, you're going to follow these guidelines, you're going to have to do specific testing, you're going to have to, do code audits. I would imagine that any decent company doing those things with a third party would have to have agreements like that in place.
You would think.
I'm just saying. It just seems like that would be a logical idea. You don't just want to either that or you let the third party develop, and then before it goes into production, your internal QA or your internal, if you have an internal development group too, they can go over, with automated tools, or, your security group can do that, in-house as a part of a check before it goes into production. Or you may do that. They may do testing on their end. You could do testing on your end to make sure that, everything's copacetic before it hits the website.
Yeah.
Some of the other things they mention is establishing assurance guidelines to make sure that, all the risks that you've, when you're doing your risk assessments and stuff, that they're properly defined and that your controls in place cover those risks to a level that makes management okay with that. Which is always good because you want to make sure that things like IDS are monitoring the right proper parts of your application. You don't want it looking over in this area when in fact they're coming in their flanking maneuver around on your back end. So let's see, what else does OWASP suggest? And it's actually really good. They mentioned threat modeling, which I am so really wanting to do a podcast on threat modeling. I think we should find a gentleman or a gentle lady in the information security field who is understanding of threat modeling. We should do a podcast on that. I think that's good. They mentioned secure design, secure coding, penetration testing and remediation. See, so they're saying do testing. They almost suggest here do testing on both, on the outside, black box or gray box testing in this case of what can go wrong. I know.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to do on is the secure development lifecycle. So that Microsoft has, and they do active testing all the time. And then they, the last thing they mention is doing metrics, making sure that you drive improvement and decisions based on analysis of your data captured. That's good too, because if your metrics can show that your security actually enhances, or if your metrics can actually show that being more secure has saved you money in the long run, that's always a good thing, because a lot of folks in management see security as a cost instead of a savings in the long run, because a lot of companies only think quarter to quarter.
Or if you can try and push security to the left, meaning, instead of capturing security flaws, say during a pen test, you would catch them in development. That cost has then decreased dramatically. If you catch it at that time, it increases when you catch it in QA. It increases tenfold by the time it gets out there and deployed.
Exactly. You may lose some time in the developing end, but 9 months down the road, you don't have to go back and spend Herculean amounts of effort fixing vulnerabilities that have popped up due to a pen test that was authorized by your PCI or acquired by your PCI assessor. if you can catch that cross-site scripting or that cross-site request forgery or that injection flaw on the back end when you're doing development, you will actually, you make a small change, a 10-minute change here will save you several hundred man hours on the back end.
Yeah.
So,
or don't even code the flaw to begin with.
Oh, yeah. Or, learn from your mistakes, yeah.
Or OWASP.
Or OWASP, yeah. And, the one thing I would suggest for you information security people out there is to definitely engage if you have a developers in-house or your management to help them understand. Get this report and show it to them and explain the big words. I'm sorry, that was wrong. I shouldn't do that. Management are not children. They understand, but help them understand that you can actually help save money on the back end. And if you can put it into terms that management understands, like man hours being wasted having to fix them on the back end after it's been deployed, they probably will thank you for it in the long run.
Exactly. And I think there's some industry standards as far as when you capture certain flaws, how much money that saves you. So maybe we'll try and find that for next week.
Ooh, that would be good. We need to find those things.
I'm going to Google it right now.
There you go. And yeah, if we find it, we'll put it in the show notes. Either this week or next week. I'm sure they have something out there, or we can find somebody on Twitter who has that information. But yeah, so that was the bottom 5 of our OWASP's Top 10 for 2013. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you don't like my voice, or you have issue or you take issue with anything we've done, please feel free to reach out to us. I can give you our Twitter handle. Mine's at Brian Brake. That's Bryan, and then like on a car, Brake, all one word. Mr. Boettcher's on Twitter as well, to a lesser degree. He's getting there. I think you have almost 10 followers now, right?
Maybe a dozen.
So, ooh, well, you're getting there. You're getting there. It's all about quality, not quantity. So. We're on Facebook. I do have a Facebook fan page. I put one up. It's got, I think, one link. I don't do a lot with it. It's just kind of a thing to show that I'm on there. I'm on Google Plus, Brian Brake, if you want to find me. So I think that's everything. Mr. Boettcher, do you have anything else to add?
No, but this is good. I hope that it explained a little bit about each of these sort of exposures or deficiencies in web applications, and that you'll be better prepared to, have conversations about each one of these as they come up in the future for you.
Oh, that's true. And, OWASP is, they've got organizations, they got meetings. I know Austin has a real big OWASP presence. Josh Sokol and his folks are down there. Every major city I know of has a local OWASP chapter. San Diego's got one. I think Seattle's got one up here. Some are a little more organized than others. It's not an official like ISC Squared or ISACA group, but they do meet together. So, pick some people's brains. If you don't understand it, by all means, like us, OWASP.org, I think is what it is.
Yep.
Get out there and, don't feel bad about, raising the questions on Twitter or whatever. If you don't understand something, that's the way we learn, through doing and through understanding. So
helping each other. That's right.
And if you've got any questions about these things, feel free to hit us up on Twitter or on email or what have you. So I guess that's all we've got for this week, and we'll
be back with the top 5.
Yeah, that's right. The big 5, if you will.
Yep.
Next week. So until then, you stay classy, San Diego.